Yeah, it's Tom. Let's have a little talk here about some knives and stuff. I had a little rant in my other video where I was talking about, knives and what they were used for and just that and the other thing. Now, through the ages, man has been in the woods. They started with a stone knife because they realized the importance of one. They made their own weapons and everything with the stone knives. Okay? Now, this is a major advancement, even though it's paper thin and whatever, plastic handle. This is a major advancement compared to what they had. But they lived forever. They lived well with the stone knife. I don't know if any of you have ever used or felt or played with a stone knife, but they are razor sharp. They don't hold an edge very long, but they are razor sharp. Okay, so, but they dull really fast. So, you basically you're sawing through hide and stuff like that rather than slicing it open. Now listen, last video I said I had an E.G. Waterman, which I do, that was touted as a survival knife in 1938 in Outer's catalog. Great blade. So people were thinking about survival, but it was a new concept to most people then. What people knew then was just being out in the woods. Now, as a hunter or a kid or whatever, you would take something like this, strap it on your belt in the morning, and you would go. With nothing complex about it. Like I said, my dad's kit was a pack of matches, some fishing lines, some fishing hooks, a knife, That was his whole woods kit. It wasn't like we have nowadays where you're carrying 80 pounds in your backpack. The reason for the 80 pounds is lack of confidence. But carrying a little gear like a tarp, stuff like that, you can carry a light kit, get everything you need, and still not be crazy. Now, this was, like I said in my last video, this was a typical knife somebody had on their belt around here in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, even 80s. I still have friends that use it, and their blade's half shot, but on a flat grind, you could use it right down to everything. So they used these knives. They didn't have, Tops Brothers of Bushcraft. They didn't have the Tops, the Bark Rivers, all them knives. They didn't have, well, they did have custom built knives. I knew a friend that had one of them, but it was made by a friend of his in a forge in the backyard. So this goes on and on and on, and the list of knives are endless. And the list of companies are endless. Like this was a major company back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and 40s. And then you had K-Bar, you had Case. Now, guys who had money, or bush or woodsmen that said, I'm going to save up my nickels and dimes till I could buy a case, that they had them, and they used them till they died. My grandfather's knife was it was a case, but I can't remember the name of it. It had two blades and an awl on it anyway. And the main blade on the knife looks like a spear. He just, sharpened it down to it was nothing. So they got their knives and they used them. My grandfather spent days in the woods in Pennsylvania, and my dad spent weeks in the woods in Pennsylvania. They were hunters. My dad used to get paid for hunting back before World War II. So, if we look back to see where we came from, we'd realize we screwed something up. Or we made things better. What I mean by we screwed it up is because we carry way too much gear. It's up to you what you want to carry. I'm just saying, most people carry way too much gear. On the other hand, we didn't screw it up because we brought like tarps. We showed the use of tarps and army ponchos and pots and different accessories and whatnot. So we made some advancements, but the advancements we made, I guess you could say, got overblown. I have a lot of videos on this kind of subject because I used to be a traditional camper. Had a plow point shelter, which wasn't taught to me by YouTube. Had a plow point shelter. I had a this and that, and I was really a minimalist. All my stuff was in a bedroll. That was my sleeping bag, not a wool blanket, a sleeping bag. Was rolled up in that, hung over my shoulder, knife on my side. I was ready to go. I always carried a pouch on my belt that contained a fire kit. And that I didn't learn from YouTube either. Alright, I'm going to be asked. The plow point shelter, I had a friend of mine, Joe, which I discussed in my storytime videos. He was a reenactor. And they had plow points back when. And he said to me, this is what you do. I took an army poncho one day and I tried it and tried sleeping in it. Oh man, it was great. Because when you're in a tent, you can't see what's happening. You got to hope for the best. When you're in a plow point, you got your whole front open, you can see what's coming. You can hear what's coming better. So he taught me that one. He also carried a possibles pouch on his belt. And I asked him, I asked him one day what that was for. And he told me what it was for. And I was like, oh, that's a great idea. So I made myself a little pouch out of a canvas duffel bag. They were around they were water back in them days. And, just carried that around. It had my fire kit and stuff in it. So when I went hunting, we didn't have to wear camouflage or orange back in them days. So when I went hunting, I put on my black jeans. I put on my coat, whatever my jacket was for the time. On my belt was a fire kit and a knife. And if I was going, on an extended hunt, my bedroll would contain everything else I need wrapped up into the bottom of my sleeping bag, rolled up with my poncho over it. That's how I did it. And there was a couple other setups, I had a military harness set, stuff like that, but for the most part, it was minimal. You had a shelter, way to make fire, something to carry water in, cleaning game, your shells, your gun. Now, with the knives, they didn't have bushcraft knives back in them days. They just did. After World War II now, after World War II, you had the influx of all the surplus knives. K-bars, the pals, the Watermans, the cases, the westerns. And people just sucked them up because they were bulletproof blades for the time. Nowadays, there are better knives out there. There really is. Metallurgy became, something of a thing, and they made better knives, and sometimes more. The cheaper knives you can buy are probably better than some of the combat knives that used to be, just because of the advances in metallurgy. I like to stay traditional as much as I can. I carry combat blades, and I have them. But I like to stay as traditional as I can. It was not unusual when I was a kid to see a guy walking around the woods with a Bowie knife on his side. It was not unusual when I was a kid to see a guy with a 6-inch bladed knife hunting. That was the norm back then. 6-inch bladed knives. That was the thing. That's what everybody wanted. So that was not uncommon. It wasn't uncommon to see a guy walking around with a pocket knife in his pocket either. That was an everyday occurrence. So by just an everyday thing that, I carry a pocket knife, but I also have a belt knife. So when their belt knives went dull, pocket knife came out. Back in the 1800s, people usually didn't carry belt knives. A lot of the farm boys and stuff like that had large pocket knives. They were called Barlows, master Barlows. They were a single blade, large. I got one. Or the Barlows, stuff like that. Farm boys carried stuff like that. Generally, you got one of these when you were a man and you started hunting, and it was a special gift, like a Christmas present, a birthday present, or whatever. And your dad ordered one out of the Sears catalog, and it was a big deal, and that knife was part of your body forever. Not like now, we go through a bag and we say, hey, I want to take, maybe I'll take it. Back in them days, you had one knife, maybe a pocket knife also. And that's the way it stayed, unless you procured one somewhere else, let's just say that. So we live in an age of abundance and throwaway stuff. We really do. And we have knives nowadays, they're broke, I'll get a new one. Back in them days, they didn't have that choice. That's why people really didn't baton wood. They used their axes, because the knives are a sacred thing that stayed on their belt. This is going to save your life. Not that an axe wouldn't, but this is what people most figured would save their lives. There's been accounts of Indians living for years, almost months, with just their knife. So, like I said, we do live in a world of abundance, and I'm guilty of it too, because, you can buy something like this, we have the money, boom. Like this, I got a K-bar on my neck here that, people would consider a patch knife back in the whenever days. I paid $10 for that knife. That's going to be a great little knife for the year. I'll tell you what, even being a K-bar, and I mean it does, it does do the feather stick thing, and it will baton through wood and stuff. But even being a K-bar, this thing doesn't hold an edge for crap. But before you start in a bushcraft, before you start buying knives and going crazy, unless you're a collector. If you're a collector, that's a hobby. But before you do that, go back and Google, what they used in the 1800s. Like we hear about these full tang knives. They didn't have full tang knives. Not that I can remember till the late 80s. Western Cutlery used to put them out. Puma, places, companies like that used to put out full tang knives, but they were kind of out of the reach of most guys' pocketbooks. But back in the 1700s, they had stick tangs. They had quarter tang and a half tang. Really interesting, the hype we were putting up with, because these guys here fought Indians, they killed buffaloes and everything else, and skinned them and did everything with a knife that only had a tang down to about here, or sometimes even here. So this is running into a long video. People ain't going to stay to watch it. So this is Tom. This is the knife. And stay tuned for some more of this. I appreciate your time and your patience. You hit the like button. Share this video out if you would, please. And we'll see you on the next one.